Hello everyone and welcome to My Fantasy Journey, a channel dedicated to opinion-based fantasy book reviews. Today I'm going to be talking about another vintage children's fantasy book. Yay! There's just something about vintage fantasy books. I don't know if you guys agree with me. Of course not everyone, but not every book, but there's just something about vintage fantasy books that just feels so, I don't know, so cool and so magical. I don't know how to describe it, but there's like a charm to it. I don't know what it is, but I just love it so much. And I've read quite a couple of like vintage fantasy books that I've absolutely loved. So I was so excited to dive into this one. I remember when I read about it and read about, what it was about and stuff like that. I was like, oh my gosh, that sounds so cool. And I was so excited to read about it. And I actually ended up loving it. Yeah, when I read it. Of course, there are some things that could have been better. Here and there, but it was still such a fun book to read, and it was so cute and whimsical, and it was short and sweet, so it's definitely a book that you could just read over and over again, and it was overall just very cool and very entertaining. So yeah, that being said, let's just dive right into the review. So the book that I'm going to be talking about today is The Little Broomstick by Mary Stewart. Yay! So this book was written by the same author who wrote The Borrowers. This book, it wasn't hard to find, but the thing is that this is a very old book, so it ran out of print. So, of course, there were some editions that I specifically wanted. This wasn't the one that I was, that I actually wanted, that I was going for. But the other ones were just too old, and they were either super expensive because they are rare and vintage, they're hundreds of dollars, or they were like very, they were used, or they're pretty much probably yellow and falling apart, and of course you want a book that's readable. So I was like, what do I do? And then I read that it was re-released, like reprinted, but only in the UK, unfortunately. But fortunately for me and for everyone, this wonderful website called Book Depository had, because it is UK based, they did have the reprint of this book, and I was so happy to find it. Even though this is not the cover that I would have preferred, I was still happy to find it. And it was a new copy, and it wasn't that expensive. It was just, how much was it? It was like €7 with something. I don't remember exactly, but the good thing about Book Depository is that everything that you order is free shipping, so that was really cool. And of course it did take a while to get here. It took like 12 days, but honestly I didn't find that was too much. But yeah, no shipping, it wasn't that expensive, and it was new, so I was very happy to to get my hands in this, on this book, even though it's not the cover that I prefer, but I'm just happy overall that, that I was able to find it, and that it does have, of course, the original content, because sometimes how they alter it and stuff like that, and it does have the original, also the original images at the head of the chapters, so that was really nice. Also, that was something that I really liked. But anyways, let's just dive right into the book discussion. So, like I said, I really like this book. It is, like one of those vintage fantasy books that I really liked. It was so fun. I'm going to start by saying a little bit of what this book is about. So this book is about this girl named Mary who comes to live, to spend like some time in the house of her aunt, because her parents are away, and her siblings and stuff like that. So she's just bound to stay in her aunt's manor in the countryside, and she's just terribly bored there because she's just surrounded by old people and she has no one to play with and stuff like that. So one day she's in the woods and she meets this interesting little black cat, and she makes friends with him. And one day when she's strolling through the woods with her new friend, she finds this little broomstick, and it's not this ordinary broomstick. All of a sudden it gives a jolt, and it takes her flying over the skies to this strange place which she never thought existed, called Ender College. And she discovers that it's like a university, like a college, a school for witches and everything. And it's a fun adventure, but then she she sees that the students who are there are taught evil spells, and there's some weird things going on, and some weird experiments and some weird magic. And then it comes to the point where she loses her friend, her cat friend, and she must go back and summon all her courage to go and rescue her cat friend and figure out what is going, wrong in this college, and get to the bottom of things. So that's kind of like what this book is about. Just a super general summary of what this book is about. So I'm going to start by saying the things that I liked. So I did like that even though this is a children's book, it's very short. Like you can see, you can read this in a day. I read it in 2 because I had things to do. I had work and stuff like that. But even though this is a children's book, I feel like it was very nicely written. And sure, it was like straightforward. Well, not straightforward, but you could understand everything really well. It was very well written, and I really liked that. It was really very nicely written book. So that was a nice surprise for being a children's book. So that was really cool. Something else that I like is how original the story is. Even though there are already some books about, of course, witches and wizards, boarding schools, obviously, Harry Potter and stuff like that. Well, this did come before Harry Potter. So there are a couple of boarding magical schools stories, but I just found that it was really original. How she found the broomstick and the cat, and the way she got there, and what it was, and everything. I found it really interesting. I thought it was going to remind me of The Worst Witch. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it. It's absolutely lovely. I have the books. I just read one of the books. I have all 7 books from The Worst Witch. They're very short. They are also like children's books. I am familiar with the series, of the TV series of The Worst Witch, which is ironic because I don't watch TV ever, but I did watch TV a lot as a child sometimes. So I did grow up watching that series. I still remember watching it with my sister, and we loved that series. We pretended that we can fly on broomsticks and everything. It was such a I love it. It's still my favorite series of all time, The Worst Witch. And then when I grew up, I found out that there were books about it, and I was like, oh my gosh, I need to read them. So I do have them all. I've just read one. It literally took me some hours to read it because they're so easy to read and so short. But they're so lovely. So I thought it was going to remind me of that. And of course, it has like the aspect, but it's not exactly like that. But anyways, yeah, that being said, I did like how original and whimsical this book and the story is. I thought it was really cool and very fun. Something else that I like is that it's a very short book, like I said. How many pages exactly? It is, let's see. It's 147 books. 147 books. 147 pages, so it's very short. So even though it's short and sweet, it's a quick, light read, but it's still entertaining, and it doesn't feel so... there's, of course, because it's quickly written and it is a children's, but that doesn't mean anything, but there's some parts that I'm going to talk about that in my didn't like part that felt a little bit that I would have liked to delve into a little bit more. But still, even though it was short and sweet, I still felt like, it was detailed and cool enough to get, like, immersed into it and just, like, feel very entertained by it. So yeah, it was a very short but sweet read, very light, quick read. And like I said, you could find yourself reading this over and over again, especially I feel like this would be like a really nice autumn book, which I'm going to talk about later, or Halloween read. So yeah, and yeah, you could just read this like in a day. So that's something that I like about it, that, when I'm bored or I don't have anything else to read, which I don't think is going to happen anytime soon, but still, if you're in the mood for a book like this, you could just pick it up and read it super quickly, so I like that. And like I mentioned, it is short, but it doesn't feel dull, so that's something that I really appreciated, because it happened to me with another book that I did a review for, which is The Farthest Away Mountain. It was short, okay, but it felt dull in a lot of parts. Even though it was cool, but it felt dull. This book didn't. It was very whimsical and very fun, and it didn't feel dull at all. So I really appreciate that. Even though it is a short book and it is a children's book, it's still very, very fun, and it has a nice atmosphere, and it's just a really nice book to just like delve into, and it was lovely. So I like that. I like that, of course, the concept of the flying broomstick. I wanted to have a broomstick after I read this book and just go flying around. So well, Halloween is, well, it's closer at least. So I love the concept, of course, of it. You know, this little girl who finds herself in this manor in the countryside, and she finds the broomstick and goes flying in this adventure. I really like the concept, and I really, like I said, I like the atmosphere. It's very, like I said, vintage, of course, but it's very whimsical and magical and kind of autumny and just very cool and very fun atmosphere. So I really like that a lot. It just reminded me of childhood. So I like that a lot also. I already mentioned this. You could read this over and over again. I love that also. That it's so short and sweet that you can just read over and over again. It's really entertaining. It's, like I've already mentioned also, it's a super fun book. Super fun. I had so much fun reading it, and like I said, I just wanted to hop on a broomstick and go flying around after I read it. Of course, I didn't want to land on the college, but it was a super fun book. Yeah, it reminds me of my childhood and the worst witch in a way. Of course, because of the boarding school and the broomsticks and stuff like that. And I think I already mentioned all this. Yeah, that it has a nice autumny feeling, and it will make a really nice Halloween read. Of course, it's like it has the vintage feeling, which I love, so I like that a lot. And something else that I liked, which is kind of unexpected, is that there's a subtle reference of animal cruelty. If you've read this book, let me know. I'm pretty sure that if you have read it, you'll notice it, because it is pretty, you know, like, evident in a way. It is, you know, like, of course it is a fantasy book, so it has to do with magic and stuff like that. But there is, like a subtle reference of animal cruelty, and, you know, in this book about, you know, experimenting on innocent animals, and, you know, how evil it is and how wrong it is. And I like that, you know, it does bring a little bit of darkness to the book. But I still like that, and the way, of course, that things concluded in the end. I think it was very cool. So I think that was very interesting, the way that she put that in there, you know, that reference in there. And I did like the way that, you know, the outcome of it, how she manages to work with that, you know, the main character, and make things right. So I like that a lot also. So things that I didn't like about this book, of course, this is very short, and it is a children's book, even though that doesn't have to do anything, because there are long children's books. But I just would have liked it if it would have contained a little bit more, if it would have, like, explored more, if it, you know, if there was a little bit more depth in some areas. I would have loved to know more about Ender College and about the professors, and explore more of the college. I would have liked her to actually attend the college, more, and all those things. I would, you know, I would have just loved to see more of it, and of some other areas also in the book. So that's like probably the biggest complaint for me. It did make the book less fun. You know, I would have made it funner, obviously, if it did have those things that I mentioned. But I just would have liked more, or at least a sequel, or something, or I don't know, something. I would love a sequel of this, or an extended version. Obviously, none of them are gonna happen, but I would have just loved if the book had more content, if it would have explored more, if it would have been more, like, just, like, bigger in that aspect, you know, of, like, the college and the settings and stuff like that. I would have liked that a lot. It would have made it, like, a perfect book for me. Or almost perfect, at least. But yeah, it just felt a little flat in that aspect, of just, like, being brief about it. But still, you know, it was still clever and really cool. Something else that I didn't like, the ending, for some reason, there was something about it that was a bit confusing, that I was like, wait, what happened here? You know what, I'm kind of confused. So yeah, the ending I found a little bit confused. I think I understood correctly. I don't know if it's because the way it was written, or is it because English is not my native language, or or I don't know if it has to do with that, or it was just strange or something, but the ending was a little bit confusing and unclear for me. Just a little bit, but not enough to upset me or anything. So that was just a little detail. Something else that it's not that it bothered me. Usually it would bother me a lot. But it didn't bother me in this book because it wasn't overly so, you know, or something like that. It was that the modern setting. I don't read books that take place in like the modern time, even though it's not like the modern time because this was written in I think it was in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, 71, so beginning of the 70s. So it's not that it was like modern like today, you know, like the 21st century. But yeah, of course, but it takes place like on the time, you know, when she was writing it, so modern in that aspect. But I do appreciate that it wasn't like over the top, you know, and stuff like that. And like I said, it does have a vintage feel to it, which I really enjoyed. And yeah, even though it is a modern setting, like you could still feel like it's vintage and stuff like that. And so it wasn't upsetting in that aspect. But of course, I would have liked it if it was more like another time and stuff like that. But it was still cool, you know. I think it was done well and it wasn't over the top, because I really don't like modern setting books. The only exceptions that I've made, of course, Harry Potter. I did read the Graveyard Book from Neil Gaiman, which of course is also in the modern world, and Coraline also. But you know, I did read them having it in mind. Also with this one, of course, I did read. I was expecting that it would be kind of like in a more modern-ish but vintage kind of world. But anyways, that being said, it was still nicely done, and I still liked it. It didn't upset me, barely anything. And yeah, the last thing that I didn't like I said, it just feels too short. It just does. I don't know. It didn't feel, like I said, it didn't feel dull. But I love the second half of the book. I really liked the second half. Was probably my favorite part. So it didn't feel dull or anything. It was really fun. But it just felt too short. I would have just liked more content, or at least another book, or more, you know, extension, more depth, more adventure, because it's so nice that I just feel like it just ended too soon. And of course, this is a children's book and stuff like that, but still, you know. So I would have liked it if there was more to it. It just felt too short for me in a way. But still, it was awesome, and I really liked it. It was so fun. So, that being said, I give this book 4 stars out of 5. Like I said, I give a book 5 stars when they absolutely, like, blow my mind. And yeah, there were some things, like I said, some little things that could have been better. So I didn't give it 4.5 either, because, you know, like I said, there are some things that I would have just preferred if, you know, like I said, it just felt too short for me, and you know, I felt like I couldn't indulge that much into it because it was short. But you know, but still, very solid 4 stars out of 5. It was so much fun. Such a lovely, whimsical, fun, cute little book. So I liked it a lot. I'm very happy that I picked it up. I'll definitely be reading it again for sure. Probably on Halloween, I'll read it again because it's so easy to read and so quick and so magical and so cool. And yeah, and I loved it, and like the vintage feeling, like I said, it was really nice. So who would I recommend this to? If you're into, of course, if you're into children's fantasy, if you don't mind short books, you know, like that aren't complex or anything. If you're into vintage fantasy, also I would recommend this. If you are into like the boarding school kind of books, you know, with the witches and stuff like that, I would definitely recommend this book. This is a really nice addition to that kind of theme. So yeah, I would recommend that. You know, if you're into children's fantasy, if you like short and sweet books, if you're into like boarding school, magical, witches kind of like books, and if you're just looking for a quick, fun, light-hearted read, I would definitely recommend this book. Who would I not recommend this to? Well, the opposite of that. If you're into like long, complex books very action-packed. And I feel like I repeat myself a lot in my reviews when I say this. But maybe it's because I prefer these type of books. But if you don't like children's literature, or if you don't like boarding school kind of like books, or that are very whimsical and just very, you know, not action-packed and not like complex with worlds and a lot of things going on, and if you find books like this silly, then I won't, of course, then don't read it, because you feel like you would, you know, not like it. But yeah, but still, I feel like it's a short read, so it's not like it takes a lot of effort to read it. So why not give it a try, if you're into fantasy and if you're just looking for a good time. So yeah, loved this book. It was so much fun, so cute. So yeah, very happy with it. The Little Broomstick by Mary Stewart. So tell me, guys, have you ever heard of this book? Have you ever read it? Have you ever read The Borrowers? I do have all the Borrower books. I haven't read any of them. So this is my first book from, actually no, this is my second book from Mary Stewart. I attempted to read one of her books called, how was it called? Are All the Giants Dead Yet? Something like that. And I did not finish it. I didn't like it at all. Not one bit. So I never finished it. So I can't say that I read it completely. But have you guys read this book? Have you guys heard of The Little Broomstick? Have you seen the movie? Did you guys know that there's a movie about this book? I think that's why in the UK they remade a brand new copy about it. There is a movie, but it's only out in Japan. It was only out in Japan, and I believe in Europe. I'm not sure. It's this one right here. It's from Studio Ponok. I'm sorry if I butchered that, but it's called Mary and the Witch's Flower. So it says in cinemas, 2018, so maybe it hasn't been released, or maybe it has, I don't know, but there is a movie for it, so that's cool. It's going to be kind of in the vein of Hell's Moving Castle, I'm guessing. I haven't seen Hell's Moving Castle either, of course. I've read the book. I'm not into movies, but still, it's cool to know, you know, that there's a movie. So yeah, have you guys read this book? Have you guys read anything from Mary? Have you read any of her Borrower books? Do you like her? You know, let's talk about the Little Broomstick. Have you seen the movie? Anything. Let's talk about the author. Anything that you guys want to talk about related to this, let's take it to the comment section. And if you guys like this video, please feel free to join me on my fantasy journey. I'm going to be posting more reviews on really cool books. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you on my next review. Read on. Bye.